Hey, John.
Becky, I see that thrill in your eye. You're excited. I'm
It's
excited.
not Christmas any longer, but we are delivering a gift to our community today because we have one of the greatest storytellers in modern times here on the podcast today. And to me, a great storyteller is not just someone who can articulately weave words in a way that kind of entertains us. It's also someone that is incredibly humane, a great empathizer. They see people, they're trying to unite and connect people, and the godmother of that is on this show today. We are so thrilled to have Susan McPherson all the way from Brooklyn, y'all, here on the show today. And she is the founder of McPherson Strategies. And I don't have to give a ton of bio, though I am going to give a little bit because it's just so amazing, her bio. But once you hear her talk and once you feel, you know, the way that she goes into spaces and helps connect people, I mean, particularly women, you are going to fall in love with Susan just as we have. So I'm going to go into her bio just a little bit. She is a serial connector, angel investor, and corporate responsibility expert. And so while she's this founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, which is this amazing communications consultancy that's focused on intersecting brands, social impact, storytelling, partnership creation, and visibility to NGOs, social enterprise. I mean, she is here for us, people. She is in our space. She is multiple author, multiple speaker, been printed and spoken to everyone from CNN, USA Today, Forbes, New York Magazine. But the thing that I love most about her is she doesn't just go to work and do her thing. She invests her time, she invests her money and her skill sets in women and young girls. She's a mentor. She has been an angel investor for so many different companies, Girls Who Code, Ocean Collective, the Op-Ed Project. She's just an amazing human. I will stop because you're about to go on a journey right now that I am so excited about. Susan, welcome to the show.
Hi,
Can you
Susan.
tell we're excited you're here?
Wow. I'm a blushing shade of not just pink, but brilliant red. Becky and John, thank you so much for having me. I'm beyond honored and grateful. And wow, I don't feel like I can say anything after that introduction that will match up, but I will try.
Well, I think people are just going to be really curious about your career and your journey. Could you kind of just walk us through how you got to the place you are and where you got this heart for social good?
Well, I will say, at this point in my life, I've had 9 lives, and if I was to walk your audience through every door that I opened and potentially closed, they would be bored silly. I will say what has made it so unique is I opened all those doors that perhaps could have been at the time extraordinarily scary, but my late father instilled in me something that I carry with me to this day, that nothing is a prison sentence. Of course, a prison sentence. However, you can always return. So if you take a turn to the right and it's not what you want it to be, you can turn back. Obviously, I want to state that comes with privilege to be able to take those turns. But I will say taking risks, as scary as they may be, is what has been the aha moments in my life and what has led me to do some bold and courageous things. Some very stupid, but I grew up with parents who were very much committed to service. I had a mom who was dedicated to working for public television because she always said to me, even though she would make more money elsewhere, she felt that the content was the greatest. And, you know, I am part of the Sesame Street generation.
Same.
Thank you.
Yes. And born in the 60s, and it came of age in 1969. And my father was a professor and taught at a women's college for close to 40 years. So again, having both of that instilled in me this sense of giving back, of always putting others in first. And I grew up Jewish, although we weren't practicing. But what I learned from Judaism was you just don't do wrong. You just do good. You don't do wrong and then maybe go and, confess or what have you. You just do right. And somehow that carrying through all the way through my adult life was treat others as you want to be treated to yourself. And I also always had a bleeding heart. So the person at the lunchroom in elementary school that was sitting by their self, I would always go over. I just I couldn't live with myself if that person was sitting by themselves. Career-wise, I went to graduate school in broadcast journalism, ended up at USA Today on the journalistic side, and then worked at PR Newswire for 17 years in a variety of roles. All the way through, always had a foot out the door in nonprofits and philanthropy, whether it was volunteering, serving on nonprofit boards. And then in the aughts, around 2005, I did a deep dive into corporate responsibility. And it really spawned from a trip I took to Afghanistan. I had moved to New York City in 2003 from Seattle. And to meet people, I joined various nonprofits, both to make friends, but also to potentially date. And not that this nonprofit was going to facilitate that, because it was 98% women, but it was called Business Council for Peace, Be Peace. And it was created shortly after 9/11 to help women entrepreneurs in post-conflict countries. So Afghanistan and Rwanda were the two countries we were focused on. So I spent 2 weeks in Afghanistan working with women entrepreneurs, with other business professionals. And it was the first time that I saw that business could be a force for good. Wow. And it was a life-changing experience in so many ways, to be in such a war-torn region, a place that was such all over the news. Everything was focused at that time, really, on Afghanistan. And it was tremendous to actually see business professionals from all walks of the spectrum, whether you're in the travel sector or the tech sector, all coming together to try to help these women to grow their businesses, because more jobs would equal less violence. And that really crystallized the next, where are we? 16 years of working in corporate responsibility.
And it almost feels like it's setting you up for this moment. Almost the last 15 years has been preparing you for the last year of our lives. And wow, have you been ready? And your communications in response to everything have just blown my mind. And even with this latest one that you sent out this week, which I really encourage everyone to go and subscribe to. Susan, I know we're a little early for that, but I love it so much that her emails are just so poignant and get to the heartbeat of humanity. And I just think they're fantastic.
And to have somebody like you walk into the C-suite and the boardrooms of some of the biggest brands and companies that we know and talk to them about your goals, not just making a profit, but it's making an impact. Where are you plugging in? And being the matchmaker for that and finding creative ways to do that. I would love to dive into that. So many of our listeners are in the nonprofit side. We want to work with brands. We want to work with corporations. We don't want them just to come to our gala, back when we used to have galas, right? When people could come and buy a table. Buying the table feels like the transaction from yesteryear. We want to do the kind of things that you do, of bringing people together at the table, finding shared values. Will you talk us through how you do that, and maybe some ways that we can work with companies in really impactful ways?
Well, first and foremost, the nonprofit sector plays such a valuable role in our society, and also employs millions and millions of people. And I know this past year, 2020, has been a challenging year for many, many nonprofits. But for many, they have pivoted in a way to be able to offer the good services that they do towards things like the racial reckoning, towards things like COVID, towards the real stresses that are hitting our society today, and have been obviously for hundreds of years. So to me, the private sector, the smartest and most astute of the private sector, understands the tremendous role that nonprofits play and can tap into that. But I often say to nonprofits, it's not about what the for-profit can do for you, it's what you can do for them. Wow. And and I understand it. It's a natural inclination to look at the to look at the for-profit, the big honkin' technology company as just a big ball of money, when actually there is so much more that company can offer in addition to the money. Okay, visibility, volunteer hours, actual products and services. Granted, money is the most important, but I often say date first, get volunteer hours from company employees, and then it is so much easier to go and tap into the financial resources of that.
That's just so smart, because then you're working it from the inside too. I mean, then you've got allies that know and believe in your mission that can channel up and fight for those dollars internally. 100%.
Well, and if you look at like Microsoft, for instance, and I know not every company is Microsoft, but it was in 1983 that Bill Gates's mother encouraged him to set aside $17,000 for matching funds. Fast forward, what are we, 30 some odd years, 37 years.
I was born in 83.
That company, if you add up the amount of money that each employee gives, is larger than the GNP of Israel. I mean, it is billions and billions of dollars. And that started from that 17,000 because they created a culture of giving. Okay. So if you're a nonprofit, I would be thinking, how do I tap into that employee base as much as, the CSR department or, the philanthropy or the .org of the company. So I do think in some ways, if you're a nonprofit today, the opportunities are immeasurable. It's a matter of being strategic on how you go in and tap into. And I think it's also really important for nonprofits, and we advise this, is to do your homework. Find out what's important to that company and find out what problems you can solve for that company, whether it's helping their employees get excited and deciding to want to donate and volunteer and step up, or is it to help with set up a virtual running race that you know what I'm saying, when
I'm doing one of those today, next month. It's great. Yeah.
You can do it in unison, right? So how, as a nonprofit, can you help get a company excited to get its employees to do that? Okay. Because I do find in today's climate, and this has been the last, several years, companies are less inclined to write checks if there is not an opportunity for employee engagement.
Ooh.
Wow.
I mean, I want to say something that John said at about 9:15 this morning. So I want to copyright, make sure that you get trademarked for this. But, John, we were talking about this interview in advance of you coming on, and John was making this observation that I thought was so smart. And he said, if getting the corporate gift was 1.0, aligning values and finding ways to go in and partner, that's so smart, that employs what we call the long game, because we want to have a relationship with them, with these corporations forever. And so if we're doing that, it cannot be a tactical, ask for something like a gala every single year. The 2.0 version of that is aligning the value and the corporate responsibility into your mission. And I think what you just said about employees is mind-boggling, because and I would even say, as you go into the corporations, at least this is what we've seen, because we did a really deep dive into employee giving campaigns. You can't just have the corporation tell their employees, this is what we're going to do with this nonprofit. I mean, you've got to flip the script completely and say, employees, what is important to you? We want to support what you are about. And how do we take what's important to you and funnel it through the lens of what our corporate values are? Think about the relationship that could come into play when you employ something like that. I wish I would have known that 10 years ago.
That's recession-proof, pandemic-proof type of giving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
employees want to come to work, whether they're coming to work in their living room, working from home, or whether they are actually, once we are somewhat past this horror story that we're all living in, and people can actually potentially go back to places of work. They want to feel that there's more than just the actual job that they're doing every day.
Amen. I mean, when I think back to our employee giving campaign days, it was...
And Susan probably doesn't know this, but I mean, this is...
give a little background.
Susan, we basically built a philanthropy on employee giving because we didn't have donors. So we started internally, and that became this narrative outside of the walls. So it is very much a bailiwick for us that we believe it is transformational for organizations, you know,
and
to start
what we saw was like retention go up, like people in love, like they love their job more. They owned what they gave, like in the sense of if I gave a gift to pediatrics, like I wanted to share it with everybody and tell them why. I mean, it was an infectious cultural shifting kind of movement. So why couldn't we do that in a corporate way?
I mean, so you've got two believers here in the power of employee giving.
I mean, we're just drinking the Kool-Aid that you're pouring right here. So
one of our clients is the Women's Philanthropy Institute, and over the past 3 or 4 years, they are funded primarily by the Gates Foundation, because this whole notion of everyone can be a philanthropist and you don't need to be a mega millionaire or even a millionaire to do so. And interestingly enough, I learned, I think they come out with studies like six to 7 times a year, but one of their mega studies a few years ago showed that the most philanthropic person on the spectrum is a woman at the lowest level of the socioeconomic scale in terms of the percentage of her annual income. She gives the most. Taught me is all of us can be philanthropists, every single one of us. And that can be a $5 check, that can be a $50 check, because the dopamine you get off of giving leads to so much more. Because as you said, Becky, people then talk about it. It becomes infectious. Other people want to get involved. So what you're doing is you're creating almost like a fireworks display of giving, right? And people want to be part of that because it is a drug. And it's if you would think about it, it's a much less expensive drug than like cocaine, I guess. I would imagine. It's not one drug that I have done. I will be completely honest with you, because I was afraid I'd like it, so I never tried it.
I mean, I just love this conversation around corporate responsibility. And you wrote this really fantastic article for Forbes last year, and you talked about how 2020 is going to be the start of the decisive decade for corporate responsibility. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
If only I had known what was coming, right?
Right.
Well, I want to back up because it's not like it just magically appeared, right? Like 2020. And we're actually about to come out with the 2021 version of that article. That is something that I do every year. And I tap into experts, believe me, it's not just from my brain. And I have to say, we have been leading up to this moment in time where it is not just about a nice to have for a company, but that this is now a built-in must-have. Companies can no longer say, oh, well, maybe we're going to be philanthropic, or maybe we're going to be carbon neutral. No, we have to push to be carbon positive. We have gotten to a place in this world where, and I hate to say it, things have gotten so tragic, or that companies have to step up the same way we've seen NGOs, the same way we've seen government, the same way we've seen faith-based. But not just one entity can't do it on its own. So I do believe that, going forward, there is no longer going to be, a separate entity of corporate responsibility. Yes, you may have a team that is, spearheading it and shepherding things through the enterprise, but it is going to be baked in through every department. Okay. Financial reporting is now we're going to get to a point very, very shortly where the annual financial 10K, that companies put out is also going to include ESG, the actual sustainability, how a company's limiting its packaging, reducing its water, limiting its footprint, where it's giving philanthropically, what is it doing for DEI? All of that is going to be reported on. And we all know when things are reported on, it actually happens.
Forces action. Yeah.
And their community will hold them accountable. And that is the beauty of making something like this so public, because now that we're in a digital world, I mean, we're tuning in. We want to know what our companies are doing. We want to know where they're misstepping. And we have the power as a consumer to say, I'm not going to buy that anymore because, again, it doesn't align with my values. And you get enough people that can create a movement, corporations are going to have to listen. And I say, yay. I am so glad that this moment is here. And I love what you said about how it's going to be baked into every department, because everyone has a role to play in this. Wherever you are, it doesn't mean that because you're not in the corporate responsibility or the community development sector or whatever the part of the company is, that is what we would have called, oh, that's the giving arm. That's our checking the box. It's got to be everywhere.
So, Susan, I mean, you are the ultimate connector, right? Of people, of causes, of things. And I love that your book that's about to drop here in March, The Lost Art of Connecting. Would you kind of give us a little preview of that? I think we're going to release before the book comes out, but we can't wait to get our hands on it. Would you walk us through, what made you want to write this book, and then, kind of share some of your methodology and teachings?
Thank you, John. Well, it's a labor of love. And honestly, writing it during a global pandemic was a good thing, because I live alone and I don't have children. And there were moments of time, lots of moments, where I was very lonely. And having, the book on top of course, my wonderful colleagues really kind of kept me grounded. And also throughout the book, I interview about 35 individuals, many of which you've heard of, who talk about their community building techniques, how they have been staying connected. Obviously long before the pandemic, but also during the pandemic. And it was very cathartic to be doing that during this moment in time. But the book is truly what I thought everybody knew how to do. And then by the time I got into my mid 40s, everybody was like, no, really, how to connect people. I'm like, everybody knows how to connect people. But when I finally sat down and kind of figured out my methodology, I realized, well, there's something there, and maybe it can be helpful to others, because there is no greater gift that you can give to people than to connect them, and to do so in a way that things stick, as opposed to just saying, John, meet Becky. I would say, John, you have to meet Becky. First of all, both of you grew up 10 minutes from each other, and you both absolutely adore this hummus from, Salt and Tent down the street. And by the way, you both have Yorkie poos. And part of it is probably a neuroses of some sort that I have, or a very, very good memory that I was gifted with, thanks to, some unique gene that I have in my body.
Educator, public television genes right there.
When you set the context to introduce people, and you provide a sense of value associated with it, the magic happens. So the book is, it's a business book, so it's very prescriptive, probably a bit more prescriptive than I am in real life. But when your publisher is McGraw-Hill, and I joke sometimes that when I think of McGraw-Hill in my early stages of life, it was like my calculus book in college. But God love them, and they're a tremendous publisher. But so because of that, it did need to be very kind of like, boop, 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 boop. And
I hope it is a textbook.
Pardon me?
I said, I hope it is a textbook. It's missing, I mean, I went to college and didn't learn how to connect with people other than, what you learned doing it. But
Well, there are lots of very specific examples, but the book is divided up into 3 different parts called Gather, Ask, Do. And gather is the proverbial, how do you get people to come together? Okay. And clearly during a pandemic, it's a bit more challenging. So as you can see, we've gotten very creative, using all the technologies, but also gathering can be as simple as sending a text to someone. Okay. And just saying hello. That is a means of gathering. But it also, if you think about it during normal, whatever that means, normal times, some fairly new phenomena that we've all encountered is FOMO, fear of missing out, right? And for folks, younger folks coming up of age, it's terribly hard today because you can actually see events happening that you are not included in. I would always, in my world, in the 90s and the 2000s, I would find out about it after the fact, which was also devastating. However, what I learned was, okay, if I'm not invited or I don't have a seat at the table, make my own table. and gather people together, whether it's 4 people having a cup of coffee or 6 friends going on a group walk or, getting on a bike ride and going with friends. But I also, one of the items I point out in the book is instead of FOMO, let's do JOMO, the joy of meeting others. Because everyone we meet is literally a connective tissue, a connective point, a breadcrumb to something else, to someone else, to something we don't know. And when you don't know something and you learn something, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I hate to be that simplistic. So that's the gather part. The ask is kind of the heartbeat of the book. And that grew out of my being so tiny, and I would walk in a room and no one would see me. So to get people's attention, I realized I had to make a conversation almost about them and their desires and their wants and hopes and dreams. Not in lieu of putting myself aside, but I became a very good listener. And what I would do is really hone in on what is important to that person and what is challenging for that person. Hence, walking into a room and leading with, how can I be of help? How can I be supportive to you? What challenges are you facing?
Which, can I just jump in to say, we get to talk to Susan 10 minutes before this interview started. She's already asked us how she can help us. So you live this out. I mean, it rolls out of you in a very sincere, pure way. And I see you do that. So I just had to call you out. You're not just saying these things, you do these things.
Yeah, no, at 56 years of age, you see what you get. I can't be someone. Believe me, I've tried. Okay. I mean, over the years, and I'm human. I've made every mistake in the book. But I have learned that, yes, there's always going to be somebody that if you ask them how you can be of help to them, he or she or they will be like, don't want any part of it. Or they will look at you with dubious eyes, like there's some agenda. Okay. That's just human. There are those humans on this planet. But for most part, we all need help. Okay. And especially in the world we're living in today. So leading with how can I help rather than, I think for years, what we thought of the traditional networking where it was all about what you can get really changes the dynamic. And it also got me over my fear of intimidation of being so tiny. And then lastly, the third part of the book is doing. Okay. Friends of mine have often said that my epitaph is going to say, she got the proverbial shit done. Okay. Not that is a great thing to have on your epitaph, but you know what? If that's what it says, so be it.
But everybody needs that friend. Everybody needs one of those friends that gets it done.
But it is making, if you are going to make a connection for somebody, do it. Make it happen. I find sometimes that I do it immediately after I hang up the phone or immediately after the event, just so I don't forget. But everybody can do it in their own good time. But it also means fessing up if you can't do it or finding someone else who can. So the point being is follow through. All right. If you can't raise the money that you promised you were going to raise, you know what? Find another way to help out. I often say it's really important to give people choices as opposed to just asking, say, hi, will you donate? It's important to say, hi, I am helping this organization, the Y of Norman, Oklahoma, and we are trying to raise $100,000. If you're not able to give right now, here are 3 other ways you can help out. Here's tweets you can share. Here's phone calls maybe you can send on our part or make on our part. But the point is to be able to be successful with your do, there have to be options. So that essentially is the book. It's really the full spectrum of building meaningful connections and then carrying through. And it's not a linear thing, right? You open up the door stays open. There may be the doors closing and opening, closing and opening, but it is a long-term over the arc of your lifetime endeavor.
And if I can connect it back to the doors that you were talking about at the beginning, it may seem incredibly scary, incredibly risky to walk through that door. But to your original point, when you have chosen to walk through that slit in the door, when you choose to open it up, those are providing the most joy-filled moments for you? And I have to repeat this quote that you said, because sometimes when we're sitting in these interviews and you just unpacked about 10 things that I need to vacillate on for about 30 minutes and process within my own mind and my own heart. But this one just hit me. If I don't have a seat at the table, then I start my own new table.
Yeah.
People.
Again.
If you feel like you're alone in this world, I can assure you that someone else feels that too. And if I apply this through a business lens, if you have gone into your donor's office and they have flat out said no to your solicitation, that's okay. And I mean, I feel like Susan is giving us permission to say, it's okay. And what we need to have in the back of our arsenal are these things that's okay, because we love you and our values align. So here's some other ways that you can plug in. And I'm just really curious and interested in building a long-term relationship with you. I understand the timing's not going to work out right now, but we are so much aligned with what you are trying to deliver. And if you're not, that's okay. I'm going to go over here to my new table and I'm going to find another company that does align. And so the joy of meeting others, the JOMO, which is now my new favorite phrase. I'm going to say it about 10 times because we want this trending. It is everything. And you just tapped into humanity with what you just said about seeing people and connecting John and I through our hummus and through our Yorkie poos. Because honestly, people, that is what it is. When I think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, when I would go to networking events as a young professional and I'm looking around, my eyes are this big. I don't know anyone. I don't know what to do. And it's like, I'm Becky. I work at company A. Oh, I'm Jim. I work at company B. Where do we go from there? You know, it would be so great if you could be a connector in this world and just connect somebody's hands in a way that is so intrinsically interesting. I mean, John and I would talk about hummus because we do both like hummus.
We do.
So
I've
Julie,
got like 3 varieties in my fridge.
I sure do love it.
John's a vegetarian. He has to like hummus. So much good to unpack there. I am just really curious about how this method of gather, ask, and do is connecting and in parallel with these trends that you're watching right now. And how would you encourage nonprofits to implement this to just build these genuine partnerships?
That's probably another podcast.
Come back. We'll do it tomorrow.
Yay.
I think I mean, nonprofits we know right now are definitely facing challenges, right? I mean, it's just there's 1.4 million nonprofits, I think, on average. I think that number it vacillates a bit in this country today, and many of them are fighting for the same dollars. So I think you do have to get very creative on how you're going to get a seat at the table. The beautiful thing is there are so many ways now to connect with people. Okay. We have the traditional Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, but there's things I'm not a user because I'm over the hill, but TikTok, I mean, there's all these ways to start putting yourself out there, but instead of just putting yourself out there is showcasing others. Use these means to actually showcase the people you are impacting, okay, to lead others, right? I think it's thinking truly, and this is such an overused phrase, but really thinking out of the box. We thankfully are not going to be in quarantine forever and socially distancing. So I think now is a really good time, since thankfully the vaccine is on the way, to be thinking about how are you going to show up? How are you going to start inviting people in and making sure that you get outside of your bubbles of the same people that look just like you? Like, how are you going to expand beyond that? And how are you going to be opening those doors that you're terrified of opening up? I often say it's been, at least in my lifetime, the detour is not the destination. Because if you had said to me when I was 25 that at 56 I was going to run my own company, serve on 4 nonprofit boards, have angel invested in 18 women-led startups, and was single, childless, and parentless, I would have said, what? Okay. But would I have done it any other way? No. I mean, we just, yes, maybe I would have tweaked this, tweaked that. Maybe I wouldn't have dated that fella, things like that. But the point being is we are gifted with choices. And again, I always have to pause because I know that millions of people don't have choices. So I want to make that clear. I was lucky enough to be gifted with choices. And, but I've always worked very, very hard. And I have to say that it is opening that door and is taking risk. And most importantly is being inclusive and inviting people to be at your table. And I don't know if I just answered your question.
I loved it even more.
I don't know, but
Susan.
we're all like puddles over here. Thank you.
Now that we're emotionally raw, John, you should ask her what her favorite philanthropy story is so we can cry.
Oh, God. Please edit out anything that just babbles on. I apologize. Seriously.
No, my 25-year-old self just loved that. I think young professionals will really love that message.
100%.
That was good.
You know what? I do want to share an important point, and that is one of the themes throughout the book is always take the meetings, which I know is a constant, just fraught emotional decision because we are all so busy. And we know that, if somebody reaches out to you and asks to pick your proverbial brain, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard, right? So I do say use another terminology. And the book talks about how to get those meetings. And oftentimes it's very much, how can I be of help to get those meetings? What can I be doing? And even though you might be a 25-year-old professional, you may think you don't have the capacity to help. But again, everyone has something to offer, every single person, no matter who you are. But I often, I credit the success that my company has now had, and my team sees it because in my 20s and 30s and 40s, when someone would reach out and say, hey, do you have 20 minutes to chat with me? I took those meetings. And those people have come back around to help. And it wasn't that I was thinking on my 25th birthday that in 30 years, I'm going to run a company and I'm going to need you to hire my company. I mean, that was not part of the intent. So the point being is I didn't get to where I am by saying no. All right. And so I think it's really, really important for all of us to take those meetings because we never know what we don't know.
I love that. Susan plays the long game. And
everyone matters.
And everyone matters. Yeah. Those are two of our cornerstones of our company. So I love that you elevated that. Well, we want the book. So please, second that it's available, we're going to push that out and share it with our community. Can't wait to read all of your wisdom. Susan, you've had such a breadth of experience. I loved your story of being in Afghanistan. Would you lift something, a moment in philanthropy that has stuck with you over the years? I know you've had a lot of experiences, so it may be hard to narrow that down.
I've had, so many, and a moment in philanthropy. Yes, clearly my journey in Afghanistan was tremendously valuable and heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. But I have to say, in the past year, I recently joined the board of an organization called the 19th. The 19th it's the first nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization built at the intersection of women and public policy. And in this day and age where we know there's so much visceral and just animosity in the newsrooms across this country and just how much vitriol that exists, it is so vitally important for our public to have raw news as it is, right? Without anybody's opinions. Yes, there's always a place for opinion and op-eds and everything else, but just great news told as it is, and also told by more voices. And the goal of the 19th is actually to get women's voices out in newsrooms, because newsrooms even today are still very much dominated by men. And I was honored to get involved, but I was actually so excited to get involved because I really see this as vitally important. And it is a nonprofit, and it is if you look back at the last year, the news that this organization has been able to put out is unfathomable from a startup nonprofit. So I'm proud to be a funder. I'm proud to fundraise for the organization. And I realize that isn't as dramatic as perhaps my Afghanistan story, but I think it's important to say that even in today's climate, a nonprofit can launch and be successful and fundraise successfully and create a name for itself during a global pandemic. And the title is the 19th with an asterisk, because the 19th Amendment fell short of serving all women.
Oh.
Wow.
Based in Austin, not far from you all.
Oh.
Of course, it's in Austin. Progressive.
Let's
like,
get the
tell it
19th
like
on the
it
show.
is. Yeah.
Come on, 19th.
That'll
That's
be
awesome.
added to the ungettable get list of our podcast.
I
Guests
can
that
help.
we'd like to please connect us in.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
I have taken so many nuggets away from this interview, and not even just nuggets. I'm going to need to sit in this interview a little bit and think about it afterward. And I hope that everyone else who's listening does the same. But we like to ask all of our guests, like, what is one good thing? And whether that's a piece of advice, something that somebody could do today to help bring more goodness and kindness into the world. What would you say, Susan?
Probably the simplest and easiest thing that actually I would love every single one of your listeners to do in the next hour is pick up the phone and call someone you love who you haven't talked to in some semblance of time, a year, 5 years, a month, a week. That is it.
Why is Susan so great?
Love it.
John is on the ground almost.
We're texting each other and emoting about you. Sorry. But hey, we want to be respectful of your time.
I know.
Too. So
Low-hanging fruit, because guess what? People do it. But also just think when you're on the receiving end of one of those calls, just think what it means, what it feels like. Okay.
There is a really amazing, I don't know if you watch The Office, but Rainn Wilson has an incredible organization called Soul Pancake, and it's all about curating happiness and creativity. And they have
Oh,
an
I love
exercise. Julie, you can cut this out if you want.
My friends help run it. It's owned by
What?
Participant,
Becky's
Participant
about to-
Media that did, Inconvenient Truth and
She
God.
loves them.
Ruth Bader, RBG, and On the Basis of Sex. It's the same company, and they've been a client. So maybe I can help you get folks from.
I love
Soul-
that I'm about to tell her what something that Soul Pancake
know,
did.
she's
But
like-
have you
She knows
seen?
this.
It's like
Have
I'm
you
trying to
seen
be
this
nice
where
and just
they
smile.
where they had people come in and they had them say who someone significant that did something significant in their life. They named them. Then they said, write them a letter. So they sat there and literally thanked them for what they meant in their life. And then they handed them a phone and said, call and read them this letter. And they videotaped the whole thing. And
my
they've got the other
gosh.
person on the other line. I am just crying. It was just a simple little, I'm just like
I love
probably
it.
eating some Haagen-Dazs or something.
Yeah, right.
But it was so incredible. And that is literally what I thought of, because the reaction, if you've ever watched that video, to people on the other end and the face of the person when you say call them is like horror, which
Seriously.
is like, why?
The world needs it.
Why? So yes, you can cut that out, Julie, but I just geeked out that you know who Soul Pancake is. Okay.
Susan, you've got a fan club office in Edmond, Oklahoma here. Okay.
I'm coming to
Well, how-
visit. I love you all. Seriously.
We want t-shirts. Can we make t-shirts for the Susan Fan Club?
Susan's
okay.
Fan Club.
But we want our listeners to be able to connect with you. If you're not getting the McPherson memo, your inbox is going to be sad and it's going to be happy when you subscribe. But would you kick people to your website and tell us where you hang out online and so people can find you?
Sure. Well, website is mcpstrategies.com, MCP Strategies. And you can find me on all the interwebs at Susan McP1. Evidently, there was another Susan McPherson somewhere in time.
But you're number
God
one.
love her. And I had to add the number 1 to my name. So Instagram, Twitter, you can obviously find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. And the book website is thelostartofconnecting.com.
Well, we will be
Awesome.
sure to put a link when that goes live. And I've never done this before on the podcast, but it just feels right to do it right now. But I kind of want to dedicate this episode to Susan's mother to Bill Gates's mother and to all the mothers out there that live love and service and reaching their hands down and pulling someone up. Because as you were talking for the last however minutes, I have just been thinking about Bill Gates's mother and your mother. And by gently putting these little opportunities in front of your children, look at what Bill Gates has been able to do. Look at what Susan has been able to do. Look at the collective of all of our mothers. And so thank you, moms, for what you are doing to inspire us to go out, to help more people, and to love just a little bit more.
I'm going to cry now. That's beautiful. Thank you, Becky. And thank you all. This was the highlight of my month. So truly, thank you. And by all means, however I can be of help to you three, and to the podcast, and to all the good work you do, count me in. I'm there.
You're a good human. Thank you for
so
being
much.
here.
Have a great day. Bye. Mwah.